Welcome back to Big Brave Business. I'm your host, Sarah K. Heater. Big Brave Business is a podcast where we challenge the status quo of traditional business practices. So if you're ready to challenge norms, rewrite the rules, and redefine what it means to lead with courage and integrity, then grab a notebook and let's dive in. Welcome back to Big Brave Business. My guest today is Betsaida Lebron. She is a team building comedian and CEO of ImprovEQ. With her unique approach, she uses the art of improvisational comedy as a unique key to unlock untapped leadership potential and foster positive team dynamics. She runs the Leadership Playground. How fun does that sound? A unique play-led program that equips new managers with the necessary skills to maintain their authenticity, joy, and humanity in their leadership roles and work environments. Welcome to Big Brave Business. Betsaida, I'm so glad to have you.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Hi. So what I'm really excited to chat about with you is this concept of being playful. And of course, that's like what your whole brand is about. But I'm also particularly interested in that bio that you submitted that I just read, that you specifically talk about new managers, because I think that certainly there's some people listening who are working in more of a kind of business leadership corporate environment, but there's also, of course, a lot of entrepreneurs listening. And I think I was just having a conversation earlier today with another guest where we were talking about when you're building your team and you're bringing people in, and even if you have management experience in your like former 9-to-5 life, it is totally different when you're responsible for building the structure. And so there's a lot of new management kind of opportunities in that. Your whole thing is humor and playfulness. Humor and playfulness in leadership and business and work. Like, why? What are the benefits of that? How do those things go together?
It's so important. I think we forget how to play. We tell ourselves that it doesn't belong at work, but it's such a core part of who we are as humans. And it's what allows us to do incredible things. It comes from like a sense of play. And when I talk about like managers, I use that term broadly, but it's really if you manage people, you manage projects, you manage programs, it's if you are trying to make something happen, right? That's management. And so a lot of times that people don't realize how much people skills you have to navigate that. And that is so much of what my approach of playful leadership. And it's not about being funny, because I think people think, oh, we're just telling jokes. And I'm like, no, it's a way of being. It's this a playful approach means that I'm showing up without knowing exactly how it's going to go. I'm showing up open enough to figure it out, to collaborate. I'm showing up. I'm not going to be arrogant in that, because if I'm playful, I don't know how it's going to happen. And I'm just open to figuring it out, being fully present, getting curious and exploring. And those are really important skills for a leader, because we want to be able to follow somebody who feels like they have an intention of where they're going, but they also genuinely care about us and are open. And so all of that's playfulness. Even though we don't think about it that way, I'm trying to help people rethink about what does it mean to be playful and why playful leadership belongs in a business context.
Yeah. And I think that there's a lot of pressure to feel professional, and also for the validation, especially for people who are underrepresented in leadership. So whether that's due to race, gender, or any other reason, we have this need to prove ourselves. And this is true in kind of a more traditional work environment, but also in entrepreneurship in this online marketing space. Like, I need to prove that I belong here, and I need to prove that you should take me seriously. And it feels counterintuitive to think that people will take me more seriously if I show up with playfulness.
Yeah. And I understand that sounds a little bit insane. People are probably like, Betsaida, I don't know you. I don't know what you're talking about. And the truth is that when we show up and we can really embrace our playfulness, and this is not something you could just like immediately turn on, right? We have to relearn, we have to unlearn some things to be able to show up playfully. But that is really about helping you be your most authentic self. And so when we're able to forget about proving ourselves, you can show up with that energy of you have nothing to prove. You just get to show people who you are and what you do. The energy of that is so freeing. And I think that's really what I want people to understand is that, like, when you're in that energy of I have to prove myself, you're actually in crisis mode. You have like full gone into fight, flight, fawn freeze. That's how you're operating if you're trying to prove something, because you're already feeling like you're in a sense of danger. Versus if you learn how to embrace a more playful approach, you stay open, you're able to have more fun, you're more flexible. That's the goal.
Yeah. I had an interesting conversation, candidly, because most people probably don't listen to both podcasts that I host. I also host another podcast for troop leaders and in Girl Scouts. And Betsaida actually was a guest on my other show as well first. And then we were like, oh, we have to have this conversation on Big Brave Business in a different context. But a couple of things that have come up there. One is it's a little bit easier maybe to think about incorporating play when you're working with kids, but that also the idea of stamping out play happens, I think, a lot during childhood where, even when we're working with kids, we think, man, it would be so much easier if they'd stop cartwheeling and giggling and would just sit down and be quiet and follow instructions. So we're like really taught to conform in this way that includes shedding play. And then another thing that's interesting is that's also related is I was just having a conversation with a different guest on my Troop Leader Experience podcast, and they were talking about play can include creativity like drawing and creating other forms of art and just creation in general. And I had not actually, this might sound silly, but I had honestly not really thought of art and creativity as play. So it was interesting to me to think about the ways that some of the things I love the most about my business are the ways I get to be creative and the ways I get to feel creative. And so I'm curious if you can speak to what does play look like in
Yeah.
the business environment?
It can look like so many different things. And I love that example of that play can be creating art. Play can also be planning and researching and reading. Like, right? Like play can look like
Mm.
so many different things. What play really is that is you're doing an activity without knowing what the end goal is going to be. And you're not doing it because of the end, you're doing it because of the process. So while you're in it, that's also part of the joy. So creating is play. The end product, right? Art as an end product is not play, but the creating of the art is the play, right? Sometimes, and I think about my husband is a planner and he loves to plan. So when we think about we're taking a trip, like his play is doing all of the research and figuring out like the timelines, right? And so for him, that's play. And so at work, that can look like when he utilizes that, right? He is incredible at laying out logistics because for him, in a way, that is play. And so play looks different for each and every one of us. And I encourage people to think about what did you used to do when you were a kid? Where did like hours just get that you just like, oh my gosh, I just spent hours doing this activity, because that's probably a really key in helping you discover like what does play mean to you. I think back on for me, and I used to spend hours just like playing with little like action figures and dolls and stuffies, like because I was acting things out and really I was just playing a little director, which I love doing. And then I would also draw, and I still do a lot of like illustrations in the work that I do and the way that I show up online.
Super interesting. And I love that because it's also just giving us permission to play in a way that lights us up instead of having again, this might sound silly, but it's I do feel this sense of pressure to, oh, okay, now I have to figure out how to be playful and I have to play in a way that is going to look like play to other people. I don't know how quite to explain where that feeling is coming from, but it's like this pressure to play correctly, which is probably rooted in my childhood also.
No, I think also this was a couple years ago that like adult coloring books came back. Do you remember that? And everyone's like, you got
Yeah.
to get an adult coloring book. And I remember loving to color as a kid. And then I bought all these adult coloring books, or like people bought them for me. And I would just be like, why are they so much work? The intricacy of one of these pages, I was just like over it. immediately. And so to me, that just highlighted it. Yeah, like we get to just play in the way that makes sense. And so when I have some of the most fun is like when I take out one of those coloring books and I just choose to color it all the colors that it's clearly not, because that feels joyful for me to just be like,
Mm.
have fun. I had to make, you have to make it fun for you. That's because
Yeah.
that's what play is. If it's forced, then it's not fun. It's not play.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much that I'm just, like, mentally unpacking about my whole life, including all the way back to childhood, of just thinking of okay, so a great example is when I was in college, I did a couple of relatively important high-powered internships. I was a dual major political science and conflict resolution, and I originally wanted to do, like, diplomacy. And I did do an internship with the State Department and started questioning my interest in like foreign service because of that internship. But generally speaking, that maybe law school, like these were the things that I was thinking about post college. And my summer between my junior and senior year, the internship I really wanted for that summer, I did not get. So I had an opportunity to do a couple of different things that I did get offers for, and I was trying to decide what I wanted to do. And one of the opportunities was to be a summer camp counselor at a pretty wealthy summer camp. It was the type of summer camp you might see highlighted in like a Disney show or something where
Yeah.
like they have everything, right? Like they have all of the dream things. A summer camp that my family absolutely could not have afforded for me as a kid. And that I did love camp as a kid, but definitely could not have done something like this. In fact, the cost of attending for the summer was more than in-state tuition for the year at my university. It was insane. And
Yeah.
so that was one of the options. And I thought there's so much about this that I think could be fun, but also this feels like the most important summer in my college career as far as preparing me for whatever comes next. And I was really struggling because I didn't really like the options that I had available to me. And I was talking to my mom about it, and she said, go to camp. Do camp because this is something that you never could have done as a kid. You can live vicariously through these kids. And honestly, it's your last summer that you're really going to get to just play in the woods. And I specifically remember this conversation, which, first of all, like, why is that my last summer that I get to
Oh,
play in the
yeah.
woods? But even
Right.
going off of that, this is your last chance, and then you're just going to go work. And that is a,
You better get the
really
squeeze
in
the joy.
situation.
Squeeze the
Yeah.
joy while you
Yes,
can. Oh
get
my
what you
goodness,
can out
right?
of this last summer. But then the in addition to that, which we could unpack, then I went to camp and I lasted 2 weeks, like literally. I They were doing staff training before the kids even got there, and they said, "This is gonna be the hardest job you'll ever have, but when it's," which first of all, what? And then, "But
Wow.
when it gets hard, you just need to remember that you could be spending this summer in an office." And there I was like, enough. I dreamed of my heels clacking on the linoleum floor and the fluorescent light and the suits and ties. That's what I craved. And it's like, why did you choose this? This is what other people are telling you should be fun. It's not the fun you want to have. So there's
Right.
a lot there. There's a lot there.
100%. Yeah, and it makes me realize, so one of the things like that, I really talk about the opposite of fear, right? Because people think that the opposite of fear is courage, but no, I don't think so. I think the opposite of fear is play. And so a lot of times people take our ability to play because they're so deeply rooted in their fear. And so I think that just that quick story you're talking about, like what you got from your mom was her fear of this is the last chance you have, and then the staff at the camp that was like that was their fear of like you have to do this job in this specific way, again out of all of these fears. And so fear is what kind of keeps us from being able to play, and also why it's so hard for it to show up in business, because the business world is just drenched in fear. That's what is, which is why I love the name of the podcast, because you're really trying to go against that.
Yeah, yeah. So in a way, what you're saying is it's brave to play.
It's deeply brave. Yes. Yeah.
That's so interesting. So for you personally, what does play look like in your job?
Oh, so I try to remind myself to play in ways that are playful for me, and then also make space for other people to play. Anytime that I feel like I know exactly how something's going to go, that's a cue for me that I'm not in a play space. Because,
Mm.
first of all, whenever I think that, I'm not always right. Can we just be honest? Anytime you're so sure that something's going to be the way that it is, that's just not how it works. So I try to remind myself to stay in more of a playful space and to try things. I do a lot of play right now, and just the way that I'm showing up, and I'm doing more opportunities like this to speak. And I'm trying to, like, to me, I'm embracing that as play, as like an opportunity to, I don't know how this conversation, like what exactly are you going to say, but I'm rolling with it and letting it be light and fun. So those are more like mental ways to play, but then specifically, I find ways to have like colorful things in my world, because to me color adds play. I said, like, I like to draw, I like to color, so I try to find ways to do that regularly. So I'm always
Mhm.
taking notes in different colors. Just for me,
Mhm.
that's play. That's a joyful activity. Yeah, and I play like little games with myself. These are games I bring at the leadership playground, and then I work with teams. But yeah, so picking up something and then making it be something different than it is, right? So I might pick up my cup and then challenge myself, and okay, in the next 30 seconds, how many things can I imagine that this is? And it's just, and it doesn't matter what I'm saying, and it's like fun. I end up I put my little fingers in there, and I'm like, oh, it's like a little hot tub sauna. Just letting my imagination, there's no wrong, because that's another thing. When you're playing, there's no wrong way to play, but just letting that be how I show up and how I approach things, because that energy then I it it allows me to then be more creative. It allows me to be more open. And so then I show up in other meetings, and it becomes a snowball of joy
Mhm.
versus stress.
Really interesting. So this is making me think about some themes that came up for me from a conversation we had on the show a few weeks ago with a guest, Harriet Formby. We were talking about money. And one of the questions I had asked her is, and we ended up chucking and driving about, is what is the relationship between money and creativity? So when you have, my assumption going into that was when you have more money, when you have more resources, when you have more privilege, that there's a lot more opportunity to be creative. That creativity comes more easily. And she actually pushed back, saying that actually we tend to associate creatives with actually a lack of money. And in fact, what I ended up really reflecting on even after that conversation is that you're forced to be creative when you have fewer resources. And so there's a lot and some of that conversation we had on a previous episode, but I'm thinking about this now with play, and I'm wondering what you think about the relationship between play and humor and money slash having more resources slash privilege. Like, what's the relationship between play and privilege?
Yeah, such an interesting question. I haven't really thought about it, so this is just off the
Yeah,
cuff
yeah,
of
we
it,
can
thinking
explore
about
it.
it,
Let's
right? So
get the flashlight on and explore
yeah,
together.
I mean, I think similar to money, is it like when you feel like you have less, you have to be more creative. That is just a construct. So you still have to get your needs met. I think that thinking on my own experience is that some of the most playful and hilarious people that I know would, by societal standards, have the least privilege, right? And I think that that makes sense to me, because it feels to me like, in a weird way, and this goes back to what I was saying before about like fear, I think that the more privilege you have, the easier it is to be in fear, because of the way that it is set up, is that it is like the lie, right? That is being that's sold to all of us, um, in these oppressive systems, is that, right? There's an ideal that we're all striving for, and if you fall
Mhm,
outside of that ideal in any way, right, you're less desirable. And so the people who feel that in some way they're closer to the ideal, the fear is that they would lose that they would fall. And so that fear keeps them from being as playful,
mhm,
because you
mhm,
can't have both, right? Where the
mhm,
folks who feel like I'm already not going to be accepted in this space, like they're already going to see me as unprofessional, then I feel like I can be a little bit more myself. I am more able to play. And I really am trying to find a way to challenge that, because I do think, what if we all just stopped being afraid? What if we all just collectively realized that is a lie and there are no undesirables, that we
Yeah.
are all deeply desirable human beings, and that's the place to start. Yeah, that I'm gonna keep thinking about that, but that's
Yeah. Or if we could all find a way to collectively agree, the fear mongering makes us feel like shit. So
yes,
what if we just reject it? What if we just find a way to reject that? What if we create spaces, cultivate spaces, and seek out spaces that make us feel brave enough to be playful, and we agree to reject the places that make us feel like shit or we're never going to fit, we're never going to be able to be there? How powerful would that be? Feel like, nope, I
absolutely.
reject that. Yeah. How
And
interesting.
if that was like the, which I think is happening, I do feel like that's happening. I think that there's a lot of folks who are just like, wait, what is this idea? Even the idea of professionalism.
Yeah.
That is, oh, you're going to tell me that I'm not good at my job because I don't know how to show up in pantyhose? Come on, that's dumb. So real right now. That's the dumbest thing. And I
Yeah.
think people are getting it. There's a lot of people that are questioning all these just like tired and ridiculous tropes of professionalism and what it means, like who gets access and who doesn't. So I do feel like it's changing, but I'm excited for when we get to that place where we just see it for what it is. It's fear mongering. It reminds me, so I used to, which I call a roly poly, that fear. And so when I first started my business, there was, because that's one of the scariest things, let's be real, like being out on your own as an entrepreneur. And I would feel that fear that would say, hey, you're not good enough. Don't do this. Don't put yourself out there. They're gonna like they're not ready. They don't care. Don't talk about yourself.
Mhm.
And that still comes up every once in a while. And I have to remember that all the time. But I'm just remembering that when that I first was thinking about that voice, I called it the roly poly. Is that what you call like those the little bugs? They're
Yeah,
like the
yeah.
bugs. And because when I was a kid, I remember there were all these little roly polies that were in front of my house. And one time I was looking at them under a magnifying glass, and they are so hideous. No offense to the roly polies listening. I don't mean to call you out, but you're ugly. You're ugly. And I remember thinking, like, oh my gosh, because if you're so focused in on them, and that's what they're so ugly. But then just zoom out, they're just this little thing. And like you even poke at them, they just curl up because they're afraid of you. And so I just had that visual of, oh, that's my fear, is that little roly poly. Like when I'm
Mm,
focused in on it, it's huge and it's ugly. And you can see all the little, like,
ugly.
disgusting
Mhm.
little pieces of its, like, alien looking face. But really, if I zoom out, it's insignificant. And I had to keep reminding myself, like, oh, there's the roly poly. But yeah, that's what made me think of the fear mongering. It's, yeah, all these, it's this roly poly world we live in.
Ah, yeah, really interesting. And it made me think too, fear feels really closely linked to vulnerability to me. And play is definitely vulnerable. And I think about my cat who I have two. One is loves to play, very playful and explorer, whatever. The other is too cool for that. And he's, first of all, a very lazy player when you do like directly try to play with him. But second of all, when he plays, he only likes to play if nobody's watching. And as soon as you draw attention to him or he knows you're watching him, he's, oh no, I didn't care about that. I wasn't playing, blah, blah, blah. And I actually feel that's a little bit how we are as people too. Like, it's one thing to doodle if no one can see you doodle, but if somebody can see your doodle, then it's, oh, I wasn't doodling, right? That wasn't me. I didn't do that. Playing is something that we do secretly. And I'm even thinking about you with the cup and putting your little fingers over the edge and dangling them like their feet, right? And these are the kinds of things that we tend to do privately. You wouldn't like play on display. So I don't know, what are your thoughts about like play and vulnerability?
I think we have to start somewhere. And so playing in private is better than not playing at all.
Yeah.
And so there's no shame in that. Is find a way to play and make time for it. Letting it be a priority, not like a good to have at the end of the week. If I have time, I'll get to it, because it's so necessary for our souls. And even if it's just you, whatever that means for you to play. But it is really, it can be really vulnerable, especially to play in public. But again, like there's a lot of unlearning that has to happen, because part of that is that we're afraid that we're going to do it wrong, that we're not going to do it the way that somebody expects us to do it, that we might be misunderstood. And so That's why I think the things like I host the leadership playground is so that you can come and play with other people and practice that muscle of play, get comfortable doing it, be in community so that then you have that muscle and that strength. It's not as scary. But if
Yeah.
you're doing it by yourself for the first time in public, that can be really scary if that's not how you've operated before, because you're also dealing with all the different voices along your life who have told you, hey, that's not how to do it.
And can we reinforce or reiterate what are the benefits of playing? Like, why is it important that we play even if it's private?
Yeah. It's so important to play because it allows you to. The reason why I think it's important to play, and I know this is true, is because it connects our brain and our bodies beautifully. It is a way to quickly bring in the way that you feel and the way that you think and the way that you are in play. That is one of the quickest ways to ground yourself and bring you fully together. And that's really important because we can really lose track of who we are. We can feel like disconnected from ourselves, from each other. And so being able to play is one way to bring you right back to the present moment. Also, being present is another way to keep yourself from being in nervous anxiety or being in a space of judgment and criticism that can lead to depression. So knowing how to like take care of your emotional well-being comes also from being able to play. Being able to laugh at yourself is such an important skill, and that comes from being able to play and knowing that, hey, I don't have to take everything like it's a high level crisis, because not every single thing is. It's being able to have that space for yourself to learn, to grow, and it helps makes you a more creative person, helps you to do things a little more easily. There's motivation that you get from being able to be playful, and then also from a business perspective, it's magnetic. People want to be in space with people who are playful, who are joyful. And so if you can access that from an authentic place, people want that. And it takes, you got to learn how to get back in touch with it, especially if you haven't really been a very playful person.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Man, I love this. And I'm thinking about, I can't help but go back to Girl Scouts, which is why I had you over there first. But I, I think about too how we talk about the research in Girl Scouts of why it's so important for girls to spend time outside. And I just feel like this is just all really closely linked, which is the collaboration, the skill building, the problem solving, the resilience, and the confidence, and knowing yourself, and all of these things that we know are true of why it's important to spend time outdoors. And that's all I think true for play as well, as I'm reflecting on what you shared, and what I've learned from our conversations in total. And yeah, just really interesting, and just my own experience with play, of course. So that's so cool. So what are some tips that you have for incorporating play and humor into team building specifically?
Yeah. So I would say not worrying about being funny. I think that's so important because a lot of times people think, okay, I've got to make jokes. I got to create jokes and get people to laugh. And
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure to be interesting. You hear that about people not wanting to show up on social media too. They're like, "I'm not interesting."
yeah, and like let that go because it just, you have to have. Okay. So I tell people that it's so important for them to know you cannot be funny as a perception, right? So I cannot decide I am being funny. Viewer, the audience decides if they found me funny. I'm not in control of that, right? It's a perception. The only thing that I can control is if I am having fun.
Mm.
And if I'm having fun, most people will perceive me as funny. And it's really important to authentically find what's fun for you. Bring something that for you is fun without trying to make it about, I'm trying to make them
Mm.
think I'm funny. I'm not trying to force this thing because if you force the funny, like fun is like a fart. If you're trying to force it, it's probably going to be shit. Don't. Like, it's important for people to know. So it's so much better for you to show up and be most authentically you. What is the thing that brings you, that you find fun, that's unique for you, that's interesting? and share that. That is such an important piece because people like that's the energy that's contagious. So I would tell like leaders, I would tell people who are out like with a team, one, don't force it, don't try to be funny. Just make sure that you are finding ways that you're having fun and you're sharing and you're inviting your team to share what they're enjoying as well. So that's how you make those connections. You get to know who each other are, and you can do that in a structured way or over time. But I think it's fun. I encourage teams to rotate and just be like, hey, if you have a weekly meeting, maybe you give the first 5 minutes to one team member to just share about whatever they want to share about that they're excited about right now. What's the book they're reading? What's the last meal that they made that was they were so excited about? But like that, getting to share the things that matter to us as human beings help to connect us, help us to understand each other better. And there's a bunch of different ways we can do it, but that's just don't try to force it.
One more question, which is what I like to ask everybody before we wrap up this conversation today, which is, what is something that's making you happy right now?
Oh, so right now, this is such a deep cut of a thing that's making me happy, but I
I'm ready for it. I'm here.
so Seth Meyers, who hosts Late Night with Seth Meyers, has a web only show called Corrections that comes out every Thursday evening, early or Friday, in which he addresses all of the corrections that YouTube commenters have given him throughout the week. And it just brings me so much joy to even put himself in that position. It makes me so happy. At this point, it is absurd. You cannot just jump into we're at episode 101 and have any idea what's going on because at this point, it's like inside jokes within inside jokes. It's like a turducken of jokes. And so if you were to join it now, you'd be like, what is this? But because I've been there since the beginning, every single episode is bringing me tremendous joy. I thought we were done at 100, but he brought it back. And so right now, that's my joy.
That's great that he brought it back. And I love that you called it turducken, the turducken of like inside jokes to inside jokes. That is also my favorite kind of humor, by the way, is like callback humor. So I feel like that totally speaks to my heart. Okay, what's making me happy right now? This is going to feel so random compared to yours. If you've been listening to this podcast, you know most of mine are about food. So, right now, something that is making me really happy. Are you ready for this? Raw onion. And I don't know why, but I've been like, I swear to you, I've been enjoying it so much. I could eat them like apples. I have not done that yet. Lately, the way that I've been getting my raw onion fill is dicing them up and putting them into omelets and just doing like an absurd amount of onion. I swear to God, it's impossible for it to be too much. I think that there's probably something health related of like I'm low in something, I'm deficient in something, I'm craving something. So I actually Googled like what are onions rich in because I whatever it is, I
No,
must be
what's your
low in
body
it.
telling you?
And
Yeah.
apparently they're like superfoods and they offer like a ton of health benefits. So I didn't think onions really offered any benefit. So I'm really thrilled to know that they do. And I'm leaning into it. Like, listen, if onions prevent sickness or cancer, I am on a good path because I
Wow.
can't get enough onions lately. And yeah, it's like if I get a sandwich and raw onion is a choice, I'm like, extra onion, please. I don't know. I don't know why, but I love it. I'm really loving it.
Interesting. I
I
love
know.
it.
It's a weird one.
And it's, yeah, no, random. But I do remember when like my growing up, like they would be like, oh, you cut raw onion and put it in a sock and wear the raw onion socks when you were sick.
I've
So I'm
heard
like,
that. And like rubbing your feet with them, similar version of the same thing. Yeah, I don't know. I have never done that, but I do eat a lot of them lately. So yeah, I don't know. The onion industry is making bank off of me right now. So it's good.
white onions too, or red onions, or it doesn't matter.
Honestly, any, but I have been eating a lot of white onions. Yeah. But
That's
any onion, any and raw. Like I've always liked like a cooked onion.
no, I think you're well, one, I'm glad it's making you happy. And then two, like your thought to be like, what's my body asking for through this onion craving
Yep. Yep.
is smart.
What am I craving? You listen to your cravings, listen to your body, right? It's telling you something. Yeah, I'm not quite sure what it is, but I'll take it. what resources and support do you have available to help people who are listening who might want to, first of all, just to connect with you, but second of all, to incorporate more fun into their leadership, their team building, their business?
Yeah. Follow me online. I'm on LinkedIn, on Instagram at Playful Leader. And yeah, every week I host the leadership playground. And so the first time is always free and you can just come and play and grow. I also have a newsletter that goes out every 2 weeks that it's called Leadership Out Loud. And in that, I'm always sharing very specific, like, here's the situation and then here's like how you put it into action. I'm big on let's just talk about it. Let me like give you things that you can do and take with you right now. So I would encourage people, yeah, to sign up for the newsletter, just come play, yeah, or just connect online. Yeah, send me a DM. I'd love to chat about all things leadership and all things play. Like, yeah, it's my jam.
And of course, we'll make sure that all of the links to get in touch with Betsaida are in the description of the episode, and me as well. So come and hang out with us in other spaces online too. And I know what you're already going to say, but send me a message and tell me that you demand that Betsaida comes back for part 2 so that we can dig into more stuff, because I really feel like we even had questions on the list, our little pre-prep list, that we did not get to. So I feel like there's a lot more that we could talk about. I could probably just talk to you all day. So definitely get in our DMs and tell us we need a part 2 of this conversation, and all that information will be in the show description. And thank you so much being here, Betsaida. I really appreciate this. This has been a really fun conversation, and which great, we're doing it, we're playing, and then look at us play. And then also I can't wait to play with you again. And for all of you listening, thank you for being here and playing with me this week and each and every week, and I'll see you next week for more.